Where do I even begin? It's been over 7 years since my last upload to YouTube, and I genuinely believed I wouldn't be making any more content. Let's go back to about a year ago. Delta Force Hawk Ops is announced and a teaser trailer is released on YouTube. Initially, me being who I am, I was very excited for this. Delta Force was a very prominent game in my childhood. It had a significant impact on my life going forward. And pretty much everything that Novalogic made was like gold for me. Since the age of 8, all the way up until 2009, playing these games, my obsession was unlike anything else. And it actually launched me on a path towards joining the military myself. So I finally then watched the teaser, and almost immediately I was kind of cringing and rolling around and writhing in agony, seeing the recon bow, an arrow, a compound bow, shooting an arrow through the air, which highlights enemies with wall hacks. Yeah, that has nothing to do with Delta Force. What I was seeing was essentially a new hero-esque shooter, like everything else out there on the market, offering nothing original, nothing new, just the same old. Here's your operator, here's your special ability that the operator can do, and not only is it something they can do, it's cringeworthy stuff that they can do. It's sci-fi, it's futuristic. It's nothing to do with the Delta Force unit itself. But thank God, there's a saving grace. The Black Hawk Down remastered campaign, which based on further videos released months later, showed that it actually has immense potential to be a pretty phenomenal remaster of the Black Hawk Down campaign from 2003. So, with that, I am looking forward to the campaign more so than every other aspect of the game, tenfold. But with that, as more and more videos and information was coming out about the multiplayer, I have to say I was getting interested, mainly because the gameplay itself actually looked solid. And finally, they released their alpha, and I was able to get access and play it myself. And I have to say, I've been having a tremendous amount of fun playing this game. Now, yes, there are some severe similarities between like the Battlefield series and Call of Duty, almost like one-to-one copies in some respects. But the gameplay is solid for what it is. And considering it's a reboot and it's a free-to-play game, the campaign will be paid, but the multiplayer is free to play. I think that's a pretty big statement made by the studio. Now, of course, they're part of Tencent, and you can go on and on about how you feel about them, especially with the whole Arena Breakout Infinite thing, saying they're not going to be pay to win, but then you can buy in-game currency. We don't exactly know what's going to happen with Delta Force Hawk Ops in the long run. But right now, as it stands, it's actually my most enjoyed game in the FPS space. But first, I want to talk about the name, because the name is terrible. It really is. Delta Force Hawk Ops. It's an awkward name that makes no sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no logistical reason to it. There's no meaning to the name. When you think Hawk Ops, it just sounds to me very like Asian culture titles of things. Like you got like super Asian happy fun time, like Delta Force Hawk Ops. Like it doesn't make any sense. Either it's like a translation error or something, which again doesn't make any sense. But the name is terrible. If you look at the entire series from beginning to end, every name had a meaning to it. Obviously, there's Delta Force, the very first game released in 1998, right? Delta Force is just the nickname for the Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, which is basically the Tier 1 operators of this unit. And also known as the unit, which is a TV show, right? Everyone knows what Delta Force is. Nobody fucks with Delta Force. They're the best, right? So the game was just called Delta Force based on their operations. Here's like 5 campaigns to go through in different environments. Phenomenal, phenomenal game. Delta Force 2 took that a step further in 1999, simply just calling it Delta Force 2 because it's the second game, and it had a lot of stuff from the first game, but improved upon. And then now you have your sequel, Delta Force Land Warrior, the third game in the series. Land Warrior made sense. The weapons you were able to use, like the OICW, were all part of the Land Warrior program. It was this program to essentially try to create soldiers on the ground with the arsenal of an F-16, right? It was a meaningful name to what you were actually doing in that game. The standalone expansion pack, Delta Force Task Force Dagger, a year later, again, Task Force Dagger being a culmination effort of multiple units. It's a task force. And in that game, you're actually able to play as multiple different units, including, which I thought was pretty surprising, the Canadian JTF-2. Fast forward to 2003, and the iconic Delta Force Black Hawk Down was released. Again, Black Hawk Down being a reference to the events that happened in Somalia in 1993. Then there was the expansion pack Delta Force Black Hawk Down Team Saber, which was referencing the team that was responsible for going into Colombia and Iran and dealing with all the issues there. Then we had Delta Force Extreme. Not that meaningful of a name. It was essentially a recreation of the first game, so they just called it Extreme. I don't know why. And then there was Delta Force Extreme 2. I guess technically, before I forget, there's also a PlayStation version called Delta Force Urban Warfare, which again was you as a lone operator operating in an urban environment, close quarters battles type of thing. So again, the name had meaning. Originally, before Extreme 2, there was Delta Force Angel Falls. Never came to fruition, unfortunately, but it was based in Venezuela, where Angel Falls is. So the entirety of the naming scheme had a relationship with the content of the game. Delta Force Hawk Ops does not have that. Unless every single mission is related to a Black Hawk helicopter and its operations, that's the only way it can possibly be related to the content. The Black Hawk Down campaign remaster, okay, maybe you can kind of say that, but regardless, the name itself is just terrible. And I'm actually glad to hear that during the playtesting of the alpha, they actually took note of people's criticisms of the name and are potentially planning on changing it. And I really hope they do, because Delta Force Hawk Ops, again, is an awful name. It's terrible. They can easily just call it Delta Force. There hasn't been a Delta Force game since 2009. You can just reboot the series, just like Modern Warfare did for Call of Duty. You have Modern Warfare, and then you have Modern Warfare. They're the same freaking thing, rebooted as a new series. Recreating Delta Force in the same way would be a good idea. Or if you're going to name it something like Delta Force Resurgence, where it actually has meaning. It's a resurgence of terrorist activity. It's a resurgence of technology. It's a resurgence of the Delta Force IP. But better just name it something other than Hawk Ops. I don't care what it is, as long as it actually makes sense. I would prefer just Delta Force, to be honest. But something like Resurgence that has meaning to it, that's simple, would be better than what we currently have right now. So getting the name out of the way, the game itself is fun. Now, obviously, if it were up to me, again, the hero shooter thing, the operators, I understand that they're saying it's not hero shooter-esque. They just have operators with special abilities, and it has dynamic gameplay flow and offers tactical gameplay and whatever, your typical market sales pitch to me. The reality is you don't need to have an operator face to do that. Now, the only game in the entire series that had operators with names was Delta Force Land Warrior. And from what I remember, that was an aspect of the game that few members of the community weren't particularly fond of. They missed the faceless soldiers. You would name yourself, you name your profile, you pick a random face, and you go on missions. Half the people would put on balaclavas, so you were just not even having a face. It was just your eyes, right? Because you're hiding your identity. And it's kind of the representation that we want Delta Force to have. We don't want women running around in a crop top with tight leather pants and a Hello Kitty tablet that tells you when there's operators nearby. All of that is just nonsensical stuff that is just a complete misrepresentation of what a Delta Force unit actually is. The name gives me the whole Rainbow Six Siege vibes from back in the day, and if you guys are even still alive to be watching this video from back when I used to make those videos, and you remember my views on Rainbow Six Siege, you will remember that I hated how they used the name to sell a game with Tom Clancy's name in it. An IP that's been established and represents a certain type of game to be used to make another game. And that's how Delta Force feels right now. They're using a Delta Force iconic from the past IP to sell a game that isn't representing Delta Force in any particular way. So overall, that's my major gripe. I want a realistic depiction of what Delta Force actually is as a unit. I don't want these generic hero-esque operators that don't represent the unit itself or any operations they would actually go on. They merely took the name to sell their idea of what they want to be a next generation Delta Force, which is just not my cup of tea. The game itself, like I said, is fun. It's solid, and I will definitely be playing it when it releases regardless, because the multiplayer, the gunplay, the vehicle combat, minus the helicopters and some of the vehicles feel a little floaty and extremely weird, but it's a solid game, and it's free. But more importantly, I am looking forward to the campaign remaster, because I definitely want to dive into that campaign again with movie-like quality cinematic experience in the game, in the actual gameplay itself, on a level that has not been achieved ever. We got to admit that the conflict that happened back then was such a significant event that was overlooked by most people out there. I don't think a lot of people know, outside the movie and the book and the game, it's not really recognized that much. People think more about World War II and Desert Storm. Nobody really thinks about Somalia 1993 Operation Restore Hope. The whole context of that mission and what went wrong is a profound story of American Special Forces perseverance and ability to overcome the odds. And having a proper campaign that's going to be built in Unreal Engine 5, which should look visually very good, hopefully, is what I am looking forward to the most. I want that representation. I want that gritty, dark, realistic storytelling and experience in the game. The multiplayer is a side piece for me. That's just like, I will play that, I will enjoy it, but the campaign is where I want to be. And I wish the multiplayer would actually take pieces of the campaign and apply it so it feels similar. I want a generic soldier, I can customize them however I see fit, ground branch style, right? I can change my helmet colors, I can change my vests, all that kind of stuff is still possible to do, and I can see how they can easily monetize that versus just selling an operator skin. Being able to sell individual kit pieces that you can customize your character with on any generic soldier seems more like a moneymaker to me than giving your guy a new haircut and a different colored vest. But he's the same operator. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't jive with me, but that's just me. So here's hoping that Delta Force Hawk Ops will change its name and release in a good state, and it'll actually be a good game. And I hope the campaign itself is actually going to be awesome, because it'll be a huge disappointment if they manage to screw that up. Anyway, my name's been PepperBelly. It's been 7 years and 4 months since I made a video. Made this one. No promises on future videos, but it's been interesting to come back and talk about some games. One game specifically, but you know, there's lots of games out there. I still play games. It still happens. There's been a long hiatus for years, but I kind of back at it now, and we'll see what the future brings. Take care.